The policy, remember, of, let me just center myself here so I'm not breaking my neck. So the policy of area or carpet or saturation bombing, which I have talked about before, which again I said came from World War II, really meant on the ground, as Herr calls it, a scorched earth policy. A scorched earth policy is this idea that basically you make it impossible for the enemy to find cover. So you deny the enemy cover. So in the end, basically, what the Americans did was they went to war with the land itself. They went to war with Vietnam, the jungles, the territory of Vietnam itself, to destroy it, so that people couldn't live. You very simply could not live there. We never announced a scorched earth policy. We never announced any policy at all, apart from finding and destroying the enemy, and we proceeded in the most obvious way, says Herr on 153. Part of the later military strategy, and this is what I just mentioned, is to deny the enemy cover, which meant getting rid of this dense triple canopy jungle, where they were like, one of the questions that comes up is like, well, why didn't they just use nuclear weapons? And that was considered, and saner heads seemed to have prevailed. But Curtis LeMay, who was still alive at the beginning of the war, who was crazy, basically, was pushing for nuclear weapons, and so was W.W. Rostow, R-O-S-T-O-W. And you got to love his first first two names, Walt Whitman Rostow. And so Walt Rostow, as he was called, argued overtly for the use of nuclear weapons in Vietnam. The decision to turn, in the end, was to the chemical industry in America and say, basically, what can you do to help us? And the answers were these powerful defoliants, which came under the mission name of Ranch Hand. Ranch Hand was the given title for anybody who was involved in that is they were tasked, they brought together tankers, aerial tankers that could carry, were designed to carry fluid, and went out and sprayed, and they laid down swaths of this stuff. And of course there were people down below, there were Vietnamese people, there were Americans. And I've talked to Americans who were in the bush at this point, and they said, it just rained down on us. I mean, we were just soaked in it. So, did many of them begin dying of cancer? You bet they did. The Vietnamese, oh yeah, and in some ways it was worse, I suppose, than cancer. I'll show you that later. We'll talk about it later. The real culprit of this chemical warfare is a chemical which has long been banned for use in North America, but they were okay, use it in Vietnam, which is called 2,4,5-T. It's written 2,4,5-T, which is a recipe, effectively. It's a formula for how you mix this stuff. And the active ingredient is significant amounts of dioxin. So Herr talks about this on 154. He says there was a special Air Force outfit that flew defoliation missions. They were called the Ranch Hands, and their motto was, "Only we can prevent forests." And I do have a poster of this later on, where you'll see a guy where you'll see Smokey Bear with a Smokey Bear hat. And instead of saying "only you can prevent forest fires," it says "only you can prevent forests." And this is before the days of Photoshop. So what then are the ethics of using weapons that not only deliberately destroy the environment, but go on destroying the lives by attacking the genes, because these are teratogenic weapons. That is, I do not remember how, well, actually, no, we know about dioxin. We know that dioxin gets in to the bloodstream. It's more than that, but it gets into the body, and it actually goes at the genetic material and starts chopping it up in completely unpredictable ways. But it makes a hash, basically, of, you've seen a DNA spiral, the double helix, and the dioxin gets in there and just starts cutting through these spirals. Well, the outcome for any teratogenic weapon that is a weapon which has an effect on the genes is going to be births of humans that are either barely functional or non-functional, but may live. And so we'll talk about that. So obviously, because this is such a major issue, I've actually given a whole thing over to discussing it. So, but I just want you to get a picture of how Herr is dealing with it, and he does deal with it. And that is that little section.